Good evening. Welcome to the Board of Selectmen Workshop. Would you all rise and pledge allegiance, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Before we get started, we do have a public hearing. Donnie, why don't you come up now? You know your way.
Yeah, I do. How you guys doing?
Good, how are you?
Just a quick update on 31. 3 weeks ago, I had Donnie Daly out here. He's our liaison to DOT. He agreed to come out and look at Route 31. So I took him for a ride the whole length, which was good because they were doing the culverts. There was a ton of construction equipment going on, so it looked great. It was, yeah, the timing was perfect. And I actually cut around the detour and cut in and got yelled at by one of the cops. Until they saw there was a DOT guy in the car, and then they were happy about that. So no, that was great. And all this work and everything that's being done, you know, we've been constantly emailing back and forth to the state and DOT, and this does nothing but, you know, help our chances of getting money, because, I mean, it's gonna come down to pretty much most of the work looks like it's gonna be done, except the paving, which I think was around $3 million or so. Because like I had said last time I was in, everybody has to have skin in the game now. Nobody gets money for free anymore, which you guys are doing. It's great, so. The more work that gets done on that, and Steve consistently, he gives me updates all the time, and I just forward them in, so the more you can get done on that, and the more work that looks like getting done, then the better our chances will be, because they're doing the capital plan now, and so who knows, next year, you might, in the spring, get the money. It's not guaranteed, but the more work you guys do and get done, the better your chances.
And that was my question to you, Donnie, because we had talked before, is if we're what they call, quote, shovel ready.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's what we keep talking about, so I appreciate you chasing that, because,
Yeah, the less the state has to put in, the happier they are, so. Because I think you saw that they downgraded the state's bond outlook last week because of, we're at the limit, the $20 billion borrowing debt limit or whatever it is, so. They didn't downgrade the number, but the outlook was unfavorable. It used to be favorable, now it's unfavorable or something, so.
I don't know if this is a better question for you, while I have you here, or whether it's really in Steve's domain, but just curiosity, if another town was ahead of us on a project and they weren't as far along as
And they
we
get
were.
bumped.
Okay, that's what, I want the people at home to know why we're doing what we're doing.
That's how Maple Street got done.
Right.
Maple Street, the money was there because nobody else was ready, and actually, when I believe the meeting was held for the tip money, Peter Duran was the only one, I think, that showed up, so he got the money, but no, and that happens all the time. It doesn't happen this late in the year, but typically August, September, that's when that happens. But this late in the year, I doubt that would happen now, plus paving season is almost over,
Right.
but that does happen, so if we're ready before somebody else, they tell you too bad, too, so sad, and reapply, so.
Perfect.
Mr. Chairman, I don't want to pad Mr. Berthium's ego any further, but I'd like to thank him for all the hustle he's shown on this. No, I'm joking, Donnie. Yeah, he's attacked several angles on this thing. I was at a function with him where he cornered McGovern on the stairs.
He still promised me help.
Yeah, so
Yeah, I did.
for those who think that we're not attacking this at every angle, we are. So,
And they actually
thank you.
sent me an email last week, his office, Kathleen in his office, he's really good about returning your calls. And said, maybe we could do a match with the state, so now I gotta work. We're working on that angle. Say, listen, we need $1.5 million, we'll try to get $1.5 million from, I'm trying to get a commitment out of anybody.
Yeah.
That's the hard part, but, yeah, you're right, he's right, I did corner him.
Well, we appreciate it. I appreciate it.
And I said, Jimmy, I need some money to pave my road.
Well, perfect. Keep doing what you're doing, 'cause
All
it
right,
helps.
no questions, you good?
Very good, good job while you're here. You and Ann keeping C3 open.
That was awesome, it was a good
I
win.
did get my sticker, so I'm happy.
Did you?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a good win, so.
So,
And
just
thank
goes to
you
show.
for- Adam sent out a ton of emails and
Yeah, he
letters,
did.
thank you, because,
It was everybody, and that's a good, good push. So,
yeah, it was a good one. I'm still waiting to get yelled at from the governor on that one, but we'll see. It was the right thing to do, but,
Worked out well.
all right?
Okay, thank you, Donnie. Appreciate it. Okay. So we do have a public hearing on tree removal on Route 31, 234, 236 Charlton Road. So we'll open the public hearing at 6:12, I'll call it.
I'm just going to clarify, Mr. Chairman, it's not technically a public hearing. Public hearing has already been held for this purpose some time ago, and Steve can explain that. There is a piece of the legislation that I provided you regarding public shade trees, that when there is a public hearing,
We have that.
that if anyone objects, there can be no removal of that tree until the Board of Selectmen makes further determination. So tonight is actually a public meeting, not technically a public hearing. Well, however, you are able to take public comment if you want. And as a courtesy, Steve did reach out to people that were in the area that did have objections and that were in the vicinity of the trees that we're going to be talking about. So Steve did invite them, and I know there's several other folks like the tree warden. Mr. Ray Holmes is here, and also Mr. Evan Butler from the highway department. And then you guys back there for something else, so. So with that, turn it over to you, Mr. Chairman, and introduce Mr. Tyler.
Okay. Steve, welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and board members. Like Adam said, we have had the public hearing, and that is something that's done under the Public Shade Tree Act and under the direction of our elected tree warden, which is Ray Holmes in the audience. I have done this presentation a couple of times. We had 3 public hearings, and we did have an objection on the 3rd one. At this point in time, I think I'd like to ask if the persons that filed a written objection could basically speak to the board, and then I could go through our presentation to tell you what our approach to this process was.
Okay.
If that is okay with the chair.
Roger, you want to speak on this?
I just got a couple of trees in the front yard, they're hickory trees, and I was just wondering, is it really necessary to take them down? I know they said they wanted to have a 10-foot buffer. The trees are like 7.5 to 8 feet off the road, and one of them's been here for probably 75 years, and I just hate to see that thing being cut down for, what reason. I'm just trying to save the trees if I can.
And from our property, 234, we have 234 to 236.
Right.
So from 234 to Gothier Road, there's like 25 trees coming down. It's like, there's gonna be nothing.
I know they
Just
said-
wiping it all out.
Yeah, they want to create, they call it a buffer zone, but, what happens when you're out working in your yard?
It's
Where's the
like,
buffer zone for you?
I mean, you're gonna open it up to be like a super highway. Right now, as soon as they come over the little knoll before our house, our property, it's like, that's the passing zone. That's the everybody, as soon as they hit that knoll, all the way through our section, our neighborhood is like highway now. And what's it gonna be like that?
I mean, I could see if the tree was like on the edge of the road or something, but, it's like 7.5, it's close to 8 feet off the road.
It's,
It's a really, it's a nice, healthy hickory tree.
Those are the 2 large ones just by the fence, right? We're talking?
yeah, there's one big one right at the edge
There's
of our
another small one
driveway.
down.
And then down a ways, there's 3 more, like in a clump. And then there's 2 up on the other side of our property.
I don't know if you guys are familiar, I know
Well,
John,
he's
you-
got a
you-
PowerPoint, he can
But
show you, I'm sure
You
he
can
has,
actually show us where those
Correct.
trees are, so.
whenever.
I just have a question. I drove it today just to remind myself. I thought I knew the section.
Is your properties extend to the corner of Dell Theater where the line of pine trees is?
No.
Okay,
No, we're up
but I was struck by that, you know, the pine trees in there as well, you know,
Yeah,
lined
there's
up along the
pine
road.
trees at the end, yeah. Yeah, the last place down is, I don't know, 6 or 7 pine.
Yes, yeah, sounds about right, yeah, 6 or 8. Okay.
All right, Steve, if you want to,
So I'll preface with, I completely understand their comments and their concerns. If I were in their shoes, I might be here saying the same exact things. The trees are healthy, they're beautiful, and, you know, they do a lot of the functions that they talked about. The reason that we're looking at these trees is related to Route 31 and the roadway itself. And so I will go through that process. So the process begins with Route 31 and the fact that we're trying to obtain funding from the state to do the resurfacing of Route 31. And part of that process was that the Mass DOT came in and did what they call a roadway safety audit. The roadway safety audit is comprised of, I don't think I put everyone's name, I excerpted this roadway safety audit, there's a full copy here. Basically, it's a room full of about 15 engineers, traffic and safety engineers, different highway engineers, district engineer, engineers from Boston, consulting engineers, our police chief, our fire chief, our highway foreman, all coming in, looking at the road together and making comments over things that we saw with regard to safety. The roadway safety audit addressed signage, line of sight, intersections, geometry, horizontal and vertical, and other safety issues such as trees. The parts of this report that I'm going to reference tonight are the things that are relevant to the trees. I'm not going to try to highlight all the recommendations, just the ones with respect to the trees. So, the background. I'm just reading the highlighted area from the screen, and it's gray shaded on your handout. The roadway safety audit focused on the segment of Route 31 in Spencer from just south of Vista Lane to Charlton Town Line. The segment of Route 31 experienced 49 crashes in 1999 to 2004, plus 2008 to 2013, including 3 fatal crashes. The Massachusetts Department of Transportation has determined that the town of Spencer would be eligible to receive funding for surfacing and other improvements for Route 31 under the High-Risk Rural Roads Program of the Highway Safety Improvement Program, if a RSA, a roadway safety audit, were conducted and the proposed redesign incorporated the safety elements identified in the roadway safety audit. Referring to some of the project, this is the list of the persons that were in the meeting. From, again, the crashes from 1999 to 2004, 49 crashes, Vista Lane to Charlton Town Line. Of the 49 crashes, 23 or 48% were single vehicle crashes with fixed objects on the edge of road. 48%, that's almost 50%. 11 crashes resulted in personal injury and 3 crashes resulted in a fatality. Skipping ahead to observations, again, of the 49 crashes reported along the corridor, 17 crashes occurred when motorists lost control of the vehicle, hitting a fixed object on the side of the road, or another vehicle on the side of the road. 4 crashes, including the fatal crash, involved one that did not stop at a stop sign. So they're not all tree related. Now I've jumped forward into potential enhancements. These enhancements, not to read all of them, will touch on things like signage, passing, different zones. But number 9, clear the edge of the roadway as much as possible to ease the hazard of fixed objects and to give motorists additional recovery room. Recovery is a term that we will be talking about later, something that's called the recovery zone. Moving ahead to number 20. As part of the long-term reconstruction efforts, consider providing a shoulder of at least 4 feet on each side of the roadway to provide bicyclists with safe location to ride their bicycle along the corridor and to provide motorists with recovery zone in the event that they depart the roadway. The recovery zone is above and beyond the shoulder. So the shoulder is just a form of widening that they're recommending to begin with. To speak to the shoulder, legitimately, we don't have enough room to widen the road that much. So the shoulder will likely be less, but the recovery zone will not change. This is just focusing on the Howe Road intersection, and I'm speaking to all the trees, not just the trees from that one particular hearing that the residents present tonight are speaking about. But referring to this location, Route 31 at Howe Road, one of the points was the skewed intersection and the lack of visibility to high speed. And RSA team members noted that trees, signs, and guardrail in the southwest corner of the intersection may obscure sight lines to the south of the intersection, making it difficult to see the intersection. So this is just one example. And if you remember Howe Road before and after the tree removals, because that's an area you've gone through, when you're coming out of town and going south, you can see Howe Road much better than you could just 4 months ago. Potential enhancements. Consider clearing trees and unnecessary signage from the site triangles at Howe Road. Similar, this is another intersection. This is intersection number 2. I'm sorry, I skipped that page. Location 2 is Cranberry Meadow Road, Bacon Hill Road. And the recommendation there on page 18. RSA team members observed that the obstacles such as rock walls, trees, and northeast corner of the intersection sight lines to the north and east of the intersection are obstructed. RSA team members stated that the obstructions are located within the roadway right-of-way. We've already gone through that intersection. We removed some of the trees on the corner where the wall is, and further work is recommended. Potential enhancements. Consider removing the obstructions in the right-of-way in the northeast corner of the intersection to improve sight lines. Those obstructions include trees. Moving forward to page 20, this is an excerpt from the overall recommendations section of the RSA. Remove trees and other obstructions from the sight lines. There are other recommendations, increased speed enforcement. Those things should be done as well. Now they've summarized these recommendations in the table. Corridor-wide observations. Safety enhancement. So I'm looking at page 22 of the table. Clear the edge of roadway as much as possible to ease the hazard of fixed object crashes to give motorists additional recovery room. Safety payoff is medium, time frame is midterm, cost they noted is high because there's so many trees along the corridor. In addition to the 25 that we're talking about tonight, can I ask the tree warden, how many have we removed so far, Ray? Is it in the vicinity of 200 or more? Or? Yes.
No, not that many. 100 plus. I mean, it's well over 100.
And do you think we're halfway through, or?
Probably. There's a lot more after.
Under this approach. Thank you, Ray. Other corridor-wide observations as part of the long-term reconstruction efforts, consider providing a shoulder of at least 4 feet on each side of the road for bicyclists, same comments before, and to provide motorists with a recovery zone in the event they depart the roadway. Referring to, this is just going to repeat, location 1, sight lines, visibility, so forth. Again, location 2, sight lines, visibility. So now that brings us to the point of Charlton Road. You've heard about sight lines, visibility, RSAs, recovery zones, engineering terms. This is where I'm going to need to bring this presentation home, because this is what this is about. This is what the removal of these trees is about. Why are we removing trees along 31 corridor? There's only one reason. And the reason is to prevent injuries and save lives. This is an example of an accident that occurred on Greenville Street. It was, I think it was 2 years ago. This is near my home and on my way to work. I passed this accident shortly after it happened. The only people on scene were Sergeant Agnew and the state police. The information at that time was unclear if the woman had passed, but they evacuated her right away. Her little girl was on the side of the road. By memory, her age was about 10 or 12. The little girl was covered with her mother's blood. The last thing that she remembers about her mother is her mother's scream. And she stood on the side of the road asking if her mother was okay. That is what these are about. People lose attention and they get in the recovery zone, they all of a sudden realize that they're in trouble and there's no room to recover. And they hit these fixed objects, inclusive of trees, walls, parked vehicles, and so forth. So unfortunately, we have too many of these memorials on the side of the road. And our concern is, and the state's concern is, and that's the reason why the recommendation of the roadway safety audit and the high-risk roadway is that when you go through and you resurface a road like this, the speeds are going to go back up. Now granted, people shouldn't be doing those speeds, but we can't do 24/7 enforcement. And we know that every speed that a vehicle can do is going to get done on that road when it's resurfaced. And people are going to leave the road. It's a matter of what the recovery zone is like. So from our perspective, that's what we're looking at. And I'll get to later, this isn't an ordinary road. This isn't a rural road. This is not a neighborhood road. This is Route 31, and I'll show you a map here at the end of this. So I'm going to talk a little bit about recovery zone and fatalities and numbers. So just raw statistics. In 2013, there were 35,000 roughly fatal crashes. Of those 35,000, almost 6,700 involved trees or shrubs. Approximately 19%. So the recommendations for the comment with regard to that is each year roadway departure crashes amount for more than half of the high fatalities in the United States. A roadway departure crash is a crash at which a vehicle crosses an edge line, a center line, or otherwise leaves the traveled way. 3 emphasis areas account for more than 70% of the crashes where they leave the roadway. And those are overturns at about 30%, opposing direction when you cross over a lane at about 23%, and 19% is trees and shrubs. Those are things that we can prevent. A clear zone. A clear zone is an unobstructed, I'm reading the second paragraph from this page. A clear zone is an unobstructed, traversable roadside area that allows the driver to stop safely or regain control of a vehicle that has left the roadway. And the width of and it goes on to say the width of the clear zone should be based upon risk, also called exposure. Key factors in the assessing risk include traffic volume, speed, and slopes. Clear roadsides consider both fixed objects and terrain that may cause vehicles to roll over. So from an engineering perspective, this is how we determine what a clear zone for a roadway is. It's a combination of the speed of the road, the average daily traffic, and the foreslope or the back slope. Foreslope is sloping down and away from the road, back slope is sloping up. So depending on what that slope is, your distance is going to vary. I've just marked a couple of places on this table because when you're looking at a clear zone, it's not uniform for a whole road. You go back and forth based on this criteria. But on the worst case criteria for this road, the design speed of this road would be 50 miles an hour. The design speed is always 10 miles or more greater than the speed limit. So the design speed of this road would be at least 50 miles per hour. So I've looked at the 45 to 50 mile per hour table. The traffic on that road varies from Charlton to Spencer from about 20, from the older numbers we have is from about 22 to 2,500 to getting closer to 3,000 to 4,000 when you get into town. So I picked the 1,500 to 6,000 average daily traffic, and So then what it's recommending for the slopes is, the smallest number it has there is 16 to 18 feet. And that's for a 1 to 6 slope. That's a very gradual slope away from the road. And then if you have a little steeper slopes going away from the road, then it's 20 to 26 feet. And then the least numbers you have on your back slopes are 12 to 14 feet and 14 to 16 feet. The rough number that we've set is we're trying to get somewhere in that 10 to 12 feet recovery area when we're going down through here and we're looking at this road. If you look at the areas where we're probably getting less, it's probably more in the back slope areas, because you have to get up the slope to get to the tree. But we are sticking within the right of way, and that's our rough numbers that we're using. That 10 to 12 foot area. Basically a car width plus to give someone some room to recover. So the numbers that we're not going by the book and getting the full clear zone. We're not trying to do that. We are picking something that, yes, it does have impacts, but we're trying to pick something that's both safe and reasonable for our road. And that's the range that we're looking at. This is just a curve of that same table. Engineers use to draw lines across it to find out what the real number is. But it pretty much flattens out. Our line is this one, at 50 mile-an-hour speed. And that's basically at the 20-foot mark is on average where it is. You see where it comes in, it really only gets here for a short period. So it's generally 20 feet, and in corners, it increases. So again, we're trying for 10 to 12 feet. The rough general number is 20 feet. Again, on a location-by-location basis, you design it based on fore slope or back slope. This is a rough presentation of that number for an engineer. This is basically what you would do to adjust the curve. My point of this table and these numbers is to just basically say we're coming in below what the design criteria would be. This color on the screen here is announced on my monitor, but this is a federal functional classification of the roadway network in Spencer. You have, I don't know if I can get. So
You want to zoom out?
I want to zoom in actually.
See where it says 34.2?
Yeah.
Click on that and adjust.
Thank you. So this, zooming down to where we are on 31, and trying to get the table in as well. It's the laptop, not the user. So the legend we have here for this area, moving from the top down, the busiest road we have is Route 9, and that's what's called an urban principal arterial. And 49 also has a red section as well. Then our next level arterial is the urban arterial, and that's basically Route 31 is the darker shade green if I were to go a little bit north of where this figure is. And then the rural major collector is what the majority of the southerly leg of Route 31 is. The point being is these are arterials. The 31 is not a country road. 31 is arterial. It's part of our, the main routes of our network, much as Route 9. Route 9, 31, 49. And that's what I'm trying to say, why this road needs to meet that criteria. And that is what the Commonwealth and what the state is looking for us. The trees are critical to that element. The Commonwealth of Massachusetts can, if this project requires them to cut more than 4 trees, they won't be able to do it. It puts the Commonwealth of Massachusetts in a permit category that we're not in. They would have to file an E&F, and that's what they want to avoid. They want to avoid the environmental work of that aspect of the project. So this and the drainage work are the elements of the project that we've committed to try to perform in advance of this project. So that's why we're removing trees on Route 31. That's why we're having the tree hearings. That's why we've set that range as our zone. And that's why those trees that are being appealed this evening are included in the trees that we are trying to remove. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Questions?
Go back to what you said about the state being a partner and the significance of 4 trees. Now, if we're doing it on our own, if we do all this work ourselves, back up, how does that, are we then a partner with the state, or are there special?
We're not a partner with the state. We're doing this, the state there's no promise that we're gonna get money. We're going
Okay.
forward with the part that's ours.
But what about removing the significance of the 4 trees and requiring some special additional
State-funded
work?
project, if you remove more than 4 trees, you have to file an ENF, which is an environmental notification form. If state funds are used to remove more than 4 trees on a roadway project, you have to file an ENF, which is a Massachusetts Environmental Protection Act, environmental notification form. It's one tier just below an EIR, an environmental impact report. It basically kicks it into a major environmental category. If the state does it.
If the state does it, or if the state gives us money?
If state funds are used to
Okay.
cut more than 4 trees,
Okay.
then it kicks it into that other category.
That's why we're doing the work they're doing. Any other questions?
One of my concerns in driving up and down there, that stretch this afternoon, made me wonder, are we being totally consistent in the standards we're using? Because as I drove up and down, it looked like there were other trees that have survived, or maybe they're still to be marked. But will everything within that band on each side be tagged for elimination?
Similar, yes. Right now, we've done pretty consistently the southbound, the right side, to shortly before this location. And then we've done some on the west side between that location and back towards us. We still have to go from that location all the way to the south, both sides. There's still some pretty good sized trees there. And then we also have to do a pretty long portion of the easterly side, excuse me, the left side heading south.
So there's still, obviously, it sounds like there's still trees to be marked and still,
Well, I asked the tree warden at the beginning, and we're about 50% through.
okay. All right. And it's the same standard at 10 feet? That's the critical number?
10 to 12 is roughly what we're saying, yes.
But minimum
we're
12?
looking at it based on what the conditions are, you know, if it's in a curve, we might be going more, because that's what the recommended practice is.
I see, gotcha.
If it's behind a guardrail, we're doing less.
Okay.
And things are on the steep 4 slope, we're not chasing up to the top of a slope to get a tree. That's more likely to roll over on some of those steep 4 slopes before they get up to the tree. So the general rule of thumb with the 10 to 12 feet, adjusted for those
Adjusted.
factors.
For the conditions and that condition.
But I don't think any of the trees that we're talking about this evening, at least the appeal trees, they're within that 10 to 12 foot range.
So, Roger, you got 2 in your yard, I think the 2 I saw, right? The next 3
First of
after,
all, we cut down.
Mine are all gone.
okay.
Can I speak to you too?
You certainly can, I'm
Do I have
good.
to sign in or anything?
No, just
Name
speak
and
your name and
Name and
address is
address,
what I
please.
need.
Name and address?
Please.
Judy Goble, 232 Charlton Road.
Thank you.
Right next door to Mr. Bond.
Thank you.
You can speak.
Go ahead, ma'am.
Do I stay right here?
If you want to, we can hear you. Speak
Oh, yeah,
loud.
You can hear me all over. I'm concerned a little bit because I'm happy that the road is being done. Let me tell you, it's really nice, but I'm concerned with 2 things. I have a boy getting on and off that bus. And I'm concerned when this road is done, that's gonna be a speedy thing for everybody's gonna go down. They go down it now like crazy. So is there any way that you guys can put a, 35, 40 mile an hour? Can you slow people down? I mean, we got animals crossing the street. We got kids getting off buses. And me too, I get out of my car and go get my mail across the street. And boy, you take your life in your hands going across the street even.
I
So,
know it's
yeah,
been a main artery for years and years and years, and it's just, I don't understand why all the trees all of a sudden have to be cut down. I can see if they're right near the edge of the road, yeah, maybe you wanna take it, but, when you're 7, 8 feet off the road there, I mean,
It's,
and your old trees, I mean, it's a shame to see them being cut down, because they're taking a nice country road that was going into town, making a highway out of it.
yes.
in your,
They
listen,
travel 50, 60 now.
I
and
live
they get
there,
it
so
done.
I know exactly what you're talking about, and
You live on Chapman Road?
I certainly do.
Yeah, it does.
And I can tell you, when I moved out there, that road had been paved not too long before, when I built my house out there. And I gotta tell you, you're right, is if it's paved and it's nice, and the speed limit's 40, which it is, they're gonna do 50, 60. It's,
And these guys are coming in with great big trucks too. I mean, it's not like it's a road anymore. I mean,
No, and you're right, but, that's why, even when I moved out there, and I'm going back a ton of years,
yeah.
they used to sit in my, I happen to, the old dirt road, that's where the police used to sit.
Yeah.
But I can also tell you this, I've probably pulled 9 people out of their cars because there was no place for those cars to recover. You hit my corner, and that's where they lost it. So when they put in the drainage which prevented it, and I sympathize about the trees, I really do. But the problem is, and I tell you guys, go out there and start pulling people out of their cars, and it's the worst feeling in the world. And even after they did the section in front of my house, we had a wreck not too long after that. And the thankful thing was, is she had enough room to try to slow down when you, just after my driveway, that kind of, and if the big rock wasn't there, she might have came back, I don't know. It's no longer there the way it was, but, so, as much as I sympathize, we have to look at public safety at the same time. And by holding back, and we're only looking at 10 to 12 feet, the one thing I will say, and I'm not thrilled over, and it doesn't matter, is once we cut a tree down and we leave a stump that is this high, as far as I'm concerned, that's a launch pad. So I have concerns about when we do this and how we get to that next move. And I've talked to Evan, I talked to everybody, I know we did stump grinding, but, so, it's twofold. I end up with another concern is do we launch these people towards your house instead of down the road? So,
Mr. Chairman, I agree with you 100%. I think we'd be, as I noticed in the presentation, a recommendation that's in there is also to increase enforcement on those roads. I think that should be an important part of a discussion on this and should not be ignored. You're kind of not being truthful if you're proclaiming public safety and at the same time we have no enforcement of any kind on that road. So yeah, I'd like to see that played into this plan somehow, and see what we can do to improve in that area too, which will address the speeding. You're absolutely correct. People, even the condition it is, people are bombing down that road like you wouldn't believe. So public safety is very important. But I also like to say, we've also been led strongly to believe that with this work, we would be well positioned to get work done on this road, which is, public safety is number one, but we're juggling balls here, and with limited resources, we've been led to believe that this would position us well for the funding that you mentioned earlier in the presentation. No promises, but a strong recommendation on that.
you certainly may.
What about all the telephone poles? When the road gets done, will those be moved away?
The telephone poles is a separate matter. That's under the control of National Grid, and they are fixed objects and they are in the way. But if you want to hold up the decision of the trees over the telephone poles, you're definitely free to do that. But telephone poles, we might have to pay for them to be relocated. That's expensive.
So what I'm hearing is the trees are in our control as far as.
Trees are in our control.
As far as moving forward with this, with the project. Doesn't hurt to we're gonna be meeting with our partners soon, on a pole issue, correct?
They were here last week?
Right.
Were you here? Yeah.
I was here,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
there was gonna be
He was gonna have his liaison contact me about double
Right.
pole issues.
I think we should put that as well, a discussion or suggestions from our partners, what do we do with that? But I agree, you know, you can't,
I do agree with the pole issue, and I will mention, whenever you have a public hearing, please bring that up about them pushing them back.
We did.
I noticed one recently
did.
on Greenville Street, they replaced the pole, and now it's 6 inches from the edge of the road. So they
Because
put up a
they
bigger,
doubled, yeah.
stronger pole. We gotta work together with them.
right?
And that's one of the problems we talked about when he was here. We were probably here 45 minutes, and he probably thought it was a 5-minute
got
item.
more than he
Yeah, he got
expected.
more than expected. I think that's the issue, is that, you know, they only come before us when they're doing a new pole, not a replacement. So, when they replace a pole, unfortunately, sometimes they put it wherever they want, and it's not in the best interest of the public, but.
So that point's not being ignored. We worked on that last week. We got issues beyond just this area with our poles, so we are in discussions about improving that situation.
But it's not tied to.
Not tied to
our
this.
work, it's not tied to the DOT's work, it's not tied to
Right.
the state funding, the trigger of the ENF, although, that being said, it's not being ignored.
Right.
Chairman Kurt Norquist, Gale Drive. I was at the first public hearing, and basically same people were there, and they had cut trees, and I was just saying that as a resident Spencer, when they cut the trees, like you said, take the stumps out. Since then, they have done that. But to leave the stumps there, 3, 4 height, it's just gonna hit that and go right into somebody's house or wreck town plows. So if they're gonna cut the trees, which they have did so far, is grind the stumps. And I hate to say, but somebody said that if we have the time and the money, well, we shouldn't be cutting trees if we don't have the time and the money. So just say that, if they cut the trees in front of Mr. Bonds and Mr. Young lady over here, grind the stumps, because
They
that's
did.
right next to the road. Well, yeah, but if they're gonna do Bonds's, grind the stumps next to the road, because if the cars hit that, they're gonna go right into the guy's yard, and the town's plows would get wrecked. And the second thing I have to say is, I think that picture Mr. Tyler showed about that accident, I don't know, you can probably explain that, but I think that was on Greenville.
It was.
He did say
He
that.
did say,
He
yes.
did say that.
I think that was
Yeah.
that, so, it was not on 31.
No, he used that as an example of a fixed
Okay, fine.
object within that 10-foot range.
But, you know, it happens all over, but if those trees come down, and I'm in favor with everybody else in town do 31, that's the worst thing in town. So I'm just asking if they do it, grind the stumps.
Well, and this was brought up before, and I did speak to the highway, and I've spoken to everybody, and they have a plan to accomplish what they're doing, and to move forward. I think what we're missing here is, and I can't say, Roger, if I lived in that house, I wouldn't have the same concerns, but I also know that to keep this progress moving forward, requires us to continue doing what we're doing. You heard Representative Berthium tonight explain that well. I just think that, you know, and you get in front of my house, you can see how far back I went when I built out there. You know, and I know I'm far enough away,
On
but,
my side, they take all them trees down. What about the people down there, have their little kids out there playing? You know, they're gonna be next.
well, we certainly hope not.
I mean, our houses aren't that far off the road.
Neither one. I mean, the garage across the street isn't that far off the road. So it's, you know,
They have big backyards, so.
The tree's not gonna change
It should be in
that.
a
No,
backyard.
I know.
Whether the trees there or not, they're not gonna change whether or not someone plays in front of their yard. But just one last thing, I think as public officials, what we try to do is, obviously, public safety is number one, and I think that's what Steve's point when he was showing that, aside from the fact that we have a project in the works, we're trying to get funding for it, this work is tied to that. At the end of the day, you know, we use facts to determine and create criteria or develop criteria in order in which we may take actions, and that's what Steve's done. This isn't a willy-nilly decision, it's based on data, it's based on factual information, It's well under that, and we probably could go even farther than we're going. At the end of the day, public safety outweighs any other criteria in terms of convenience, beautification, or whatever. There's no greater public benefit as a public official to do something that benefits the public from a safety standpoint. And unfortunately, sometimes you look at decisions and you make a decision that benefits the majority or as many people as you can. And sometimes when you're faced with a decision that is going to impact a few, and I think that's what you have here. You have to look at the benefit of the overall public.
I'd just like to say that, gosh, we all love the trees around our houses. We get very attached to them. We feel it as we get older. We see trees that we've grown up with. This is one of those little things that you wish government could just sort of back off. But with the issues of public safety and the need to get 31 fixed and how important it figures into our economic development plans. I mean, there's a lot that goes into the decision. I mean, we try and balance out all those things, but I'm glad to hear, because I thought the trees that were marked are the last of the ones to be cut down. I mean, I'm assured of the fact that it's not arbitrary, that it's based on, as always in engineering studies, but all the decisions that go into identifying those trees. And I'm very sympathetic. I really am. I would feel my property negatively affected as well. If someone proposed cutting down trees in my yard, but we're about the greatest good. It's about balancing all these issues, and it's one of those things where government just seems like it always wants to affect the little things in our lives, and it's this nothing I think says that more than the trees and parking we've been through. So I think we have to go on the side of safety and preserving our options on 31. So thank you so much for coming in to express your feelings.
May I ask you the chair before you close? Just, not to add, but I'm in agreement. The people here tonight are good people. They're good Spencer people. They've been here a long time. I don't like doing this to the trees. It's not about the people that are and unfortunately it's about the roadway. And they happen to abut that roadway. It's not a country roadway. It's a collector arterial. And it's it handles like the bodies, like our arteries. It handles more and more traffic and it serves those functions. There's not a point that they've made that I disagree with. It's not about those points. It's about the roadway and the safety of the roadway.
I have to agree. I think that there's nobody sitting here on this board or you on that side that feels any different. It's how do we keep going and how do we continue and try to meet the criteria set forward. I do know that the biggest conversation was always how do we have the minimal impact on the property owner as we went along. And I think you clarified that pretty good by saying that, it could be 16 to 18 feet. And we're at 10 to 12. So I appreciate that we at least take the homeowner in consideration and how deep we want to really go. So.
Back in its early days, it probably was just a country road connecting two country towns when
really
when people lived in the center of town and worked here. Now it's a main thoroughfare. It gets us to jobs in other towns. It brings traffic through our town.
I wish it was easier.
Yeah, and life has changed around 31. So.
Yeah, it is. Okay.
Steve, any plans for a guardrail on that section? Especially on Gothier Road,
I would.
where there's a banking?
I would not see a guardrail in that section, no. Guardrail is usually where you have some excessive slope or like a ditch or something like that.
Even on the house on the corner, because that's not flat property.
The guardrail is not intended to protect houses, it's intended to keep people from places that they're not supposed to go off the roadway. you know, it's always an option to line the entire street with guardrail, that's a lot of money. And what would that look like?
I was just thinking the keys, that straightaway is one of the key straightaways, and people do fly,
Yeah,
so it would protect people's
There-
property.
I don't know that the project's
Maybe a
gonna have
compromise.
funding for guardrail in other places where it would, I would say that would not be, from an engineering perspective, someplace it would be targeted for guardrail. In answer to your question.
That area you're talking about, Chris, that shoulder could be filled because there's not a lot of distance from edge of roadway, the bank.
Yeah.
Those
It's basically the house on the corner, because
I know what you're talking about.
his driveway's right there,
That
and
was
they'll
more
take out his
filled than
cars.
the shoulder line of the,
Okay.
Which who knows what would happen when we get to that point anyway, as you progress down that road. I will entertain.
Mr. Chairman, just like to, we do have some takeaways here that I think, I would like to, at some later date, have some kind of conversation, or you have a conversation with your staff about the enforcement piece of this, and that, so that we're looking at every angle. The enforcement,
The pole issue, we don't want to.
yeah, with our liaison, we want to make sure this is discussed as one of the many points we have with our partners in that area.
So I take a note of those and I will relay those to staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Pleasure of the board.
I'll make a motion that we proceed with the removal of the trees that were the subject of this hearing.
A motion?
Is that
Do I-
specific enough?
Yes.
Yeah.
I have a second.
Second.
Motion is second. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thanks, folks.
Okay.
Thank you for coming in.
Make your work, Steve.
Thank you. Do you want me to shut this down?
Sure, please.
Oh, that can't be too satisfying. Homeowners.
Guess you do give a little voice on it.
Too bad. No. Okay. It's never easy, as you know,
Working in trees.
and they are beautiful.
They are nice.
Okay, next item.
Thanks for coming in, man.
It's already, already, my house is already done. You guys did a marvelous job. The only thing is, I say, I worry about the
Yeah,
kids getting off the
that's well,
bus.
point well taken.
And that's,
Me, I go across the road and get my mail, and you
Yeah.
have to really run.
Mhm.
Some of us are not young anymore.
it's definitely a valid point. I will tell you that
Yeah,
I've
that is gonna
noticed
be an
that there
issue.
is more patrols out there lately since we started doing the work. So hopefully it continues.
I will say this, you have done a marvelous job as far as you've gone.
Well, we
And I know
appreciate it.
There's a girl, there's a lady I know who cracked up just after the road to the pond over there, whatever that is, I forgot what that is.
Down to,
Yeah, and she worked nights, that nurse. She worked nights, and she just fell asleep.
I can tell you that, you know, our highway department and all the effort that Steve put in to get this far is, and they're doing a great job. And to slow that down and stop it, it just doesn't make sense, so. But we appreciate it.
Thank you for coming in.
My house looks a whole lot better.
We'd love to hear that.
They took my stumps out too.
They do a good job.
My house is a lot warmer now. The sun comes down and hits the front of the house, and we don't have to worry about it.
Yeah. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you
Take care.
very much.
Okay. Moving forward, discussion. Building permit fees, as everybody knows, I asked for a lot of different assignments this year. This happened to be one of them, to look at comparisons, look at where we were when we cut back when we had to, when building trade went down, and where we are now. So with that being said, I'll turn it to Mr. Administrator.
Just for a point of reference, I've provided you with a chart with some detail relative to our comparable communities looking back at 2010, when we first had this discussion, and then 2015 data, which is the current year. Just again, for a point of reference, the last time the board raised fees for building permits, it was part of the 2006 zoning update. And at that time, there was a goal that was set by the Board of Selectmen to adjust fees as part of that whole development and creation of Otis, such that you could work towards the process of where you were increasing the amount of funds that are being collected from that department in terms of paying for it. Not completely 100% like an enterprise fund, but more so kind of like what we've done with the transfer station, where there's a direct connection into the fees, the services provided, and the money collected. And I think we understand as a town that that's not always the case with every department, and that there's other things such as taxes and state aid that goes to support our general fund and then these activities that we fund. But looking back in 2010, you can see from our comparables, we were the lowest out of our 10 in terms of those towns that give a rate per thousand in terms of residential and commercial. Except for Oxford on the commercial side, they were at $5 per thousand. We were at $5.50 per thousand back in 2010. And then you have the data for 2015. So again, there was a time when they were looking at changing the fees in 2006, then they were going to change the fees again in 07, 08, and 09, and gradually increase those fees. Then, of course, the economy crashed in 2008. This was brought up for discussion in 2010. At that time, it was decided that we would not change the fee structure during a time where the economy was so challenging. And now we're 5 years since removed, and we're still at the same rate that we were back in 2006. And you can see that some communities, such as, for example, Webster, Northbridge, and Millbury, are as high as $10 per thousand, and we're almost half of that. You have towns like Ware, let's see, there was a couple of, well, Ware is an example of one that, Millbury and Northbridge, when they were looking at their fees in 2010, they've gone up since then, 2015. I see Ware has gone from $6 per thousand, which when we were $4.50 in 2010, and they've gone above and beyond that up to $7, and we're still at $4.50. And they've done the same thing on the commercial side. So these towns, as you saw from your community comparison chart that you saw a couple weeks ago, comparable in some of our sister communities, we consider in terms of demographics, land area, budget size, and other factors. So what I did was below in the bottom, just give you an idea what a minimal increase would do when you factor in the amount of revenue that's generated through building permit fees in a calendar year. So you can see by increasing $1 per thousand from say $4.50 to $5.50 in residential, still well below the high of 8, and then increasing the commercial rate from $5.50 to $6.50, still well below. 3 of our community towns are at 10. You'd only be at 65% of that. What those additional revenues would look like, and you can see a net result of almost $16,000 per year, divided by the rate per hour that we pay for contract with our building inspector. You could generate almost 450 or almost 9 additional hours per week. My suggestion was, if you were concerned about whether or not we would maintain those levels, that you could, rather than going up a full 8 hours a week or 453 hours a year, do some reduction of that. Okay, and I think I did 4.5, so about half of that increase, which I think is a pretty conservative, but even increasing that by half, in the meantime, and seeing where those revenues would look, and then revisiting on an annual basis, I think you still obviously will be in a position where you could increase hours based on the fees that would be collected, and there's a direct correlation between the two. The reason we're having this discussion, as you know, is because we've had several meetings and discussion about since our reductions that we've had to make in Otis since I came here in 2008. When I first arrived in 2008, we had a full-time building inspector at 40 hours per week. That was Rob Mora, and then Bill Klanzik was here before you. The building inspector was a part-time 19.5-hour position. So we've gone since then from a full-time and a part-time to one part-time position at 19.5 hours a week. We're open Monday, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays. we're back to being a part-time community, unfortunately, in certain areas. We know that, we've hashed that out, we've discussed that in length over the last few years. But as a result of that, there's been a direct correlation to the loss of service. We knew that going in, that there would be a loss of service. There has been a loss of service at Town Hall with the hours that we have. There's been an impact at the Highway Department when you lose a highway person and what that means in terms of plow routes and other things. And then in addition to the library and other departments where we've seen a loss of hours, what the impacts are to service that we provide. And certainly there's been a drop-off. When you look at one time, we offered about 60 hours per week in building inspection services, and now we offer 19 and a half hours per week. So do the math, that's a 75% drop in terms of the amount of hours that we provide to our contracting community. The public, when they come in and they have a question for the building inspector, pre-application, post-application, during an application, the hours at which a contractor can come in and meet. Keep in mind that Mr. Klanzik has to do a lot of inspections. Not only is he reviewing plans, he's going out on job sites doing inspections, he's also sitting in on staff meetings. We have pre-development meetings where we try to offer a service to applicants where they can meet with all of our staff that's involved in a development project. So sometimes he's sitting in a meeting for 2 hours a week. He is supported by the town and like all of our staff, in which we support professional development, and he has to take classes to maintain his levels of certification so he can continue to perform the duties and then learn the changes in the code as they result. So he's trying to do all that within 19 and a half hours per week, and again, at one time we offered 60 hours per week. So one of the questions that came up back in 2010 and then again here in 2015 from the chairman and other members of the board is where are we in terms of fees, and what creative ways could we possibly gradually build back some hours in that department where we could again provide services to the public that are needed on a daily basis. And this is one of the ways to do it. So I only suggested, I shouldn't say, I'm not suggesting a dollar increase, even though it's shown in here. You could do more than that. I think you have so much room to go when you're looking at towns that are almost double what we are as a comparison. Looking at Webster, Northbridge, Millbury are all on $8 per thousand. We're at $4.50 on the residential side. They're at $10 on the commercial side, and we're at $5.50. Again, almost double. You also look at towns that have changed their format from a flat fee like Dudley. When they did their evaluation and they went from a flat fee of $700, they went all the way to $600 in 2015. We're still at $450. When they looked at their commercial rate, instead of a flat fee of $400 per application, what fee would they go to? When you do it $1 per thousand, they went to $8. We're still at $550. So, food for thought, up for you to make a decision. You know, Mr. Klanzik, the reason I asked him to be here, and also Mr. Jarvis, who's the interim director of the Office of Development Inspection Services, is to, if you had any questions about the impact of service, not their stress level. I know Bill and Lee go through a lot more than they did before when you're trying to jam in 60 hours worth of work in a week. And obviously, yes, the building's gone down a little bit since 2006 before that we made these changes, but they're still trying to provide a lot of service with a little bit of time. So they are here to answer any questions if you have in terms of impact to customers, the feedback that they get from customers. One of the things that we've done recently is we have a major issue with contractors not waiting for a permit. You know, we have 30 days by law to provide a permit to review. We obviously don't want that to be the standard. We try to do better than that. But when you're looking at 19 and a half hours, you're doing inspections, you're sitting in meetings, you're doing professional development, all the things you need to do. The time that it takes to do a permit is going to extend when you decrease the amount of available hours by 75%. That's just sheer math, right? So as part of that, there's been some contractors who are not willing to wait the increased time for a permit and therefore are starting projects without a permit, which is against the law. So as part of that process, we do have a fine system. We realized that our fine system was not enough of a deterrent to stop people from starting work on time. If you start work without a permit, you are not allowing the inspector to review things like structural code, Other things that need to be taken care of, if you're doing hazardous material, making sure you have all your proper forms in place, workman's comp, licensed supervisors, etc. A lot of times these things are being done without permits, and that's a problem. So we've reconsidered our fine structure, and we're looking at, we've actually already done that, increased our deterrent to hopefully curtail that type of activity. But that's one of the impacts that has occurred. That's not, it's not beneficial to the public. It's a public safety issue, not just an issue in terms of inconvenient for people waiting for a permit. So with that, questions for either myself in terms of, I'm the math guy, I just gave you what the math looked like, the actual service, Bill and Lee can answer questions on those.
Leave it to the board first.
Have you calculated any other expense with the increase in the hours? It becomes a benefit position at that point, doesn't it?
Well, right now, at this point, I am strictly looking at the service.
Okay.
Again, Bill at one time was full-time, 37 plus hours a week. Now he's at 19 and a half. Can't legally get into benefit structure for employees just because it's protected.
Understood.
So, those are the types of things that we've looked at in the past. When we looked at the type of service, that wasn't an issue.
My only point there is, to me, what you've set out seems pretty reasonable, but if there's other expenses that are associated with it, then it becomes...
True. Well, I think that it would be covered if you went into the dollar range in a conservative. If the numbers came into the way they were last year, that those expenses would be covered. However, you certainly have the ability to go higher than $1.
When I first started to get into this, because I'm sure you've all fielded calls, and I know one of our counterparts actually personally chased some of this stuff with the building department. And I can tell you, in looking through all this, and the most complaints that I got was, nobody's there, I can't get a permit issued, they're closed this day, I'm going to start the job anyways, I don't really care. So what set me to start looking at this is, how do we provide a service? Nothing to do with benefits, nothing to do with any other thing, is how do we provide a service to the people who need us to be there? Actually, and we deal with a lot of small contractors, and those are where I field the complaints. I don't really field them a lot from the big, whether you're looking at their solar farm that climbed the hill from Harrington Street, but I do get it from the small guy who says, I'm finishing up my job, I'm gonna be done Tuesday, I got a set of plans, in there, geez, I wanna go see Bill, and oh, wait a minute, he's not there. That puts me off. Now I got 3 guys sitting doing nothing, and I really don't have anything for them to do. That was my big concern out of this whole thing, is how do we structure this and make it, and to look at the other communities and say, geez, okay, is maybe, and I know why we did it back then, because business had tanked. There was no real building going on. But I can tell you, and I don't have it, but I did ask it for them, the amount of permits that we've issued now is back to where we were when we had a full-time 40-hour department. So if we were doing that with 40 hours, and now we're doing it with 19 and a half, it's double the workload based on what we got. The math doesn't work. That was the whole problem, is it just doesn't work.
My point, is it wasn't a deterrent to the change, it was, you've got to
What's all the
calculate that
expense?
into the change.
Right.
Because I know about the backlog too, and the rush you have to get through the paperwork and all, and the piles on your desks. But I've also heard from our residents where they thought the best way to do it was the tenor of the last conversation was a little different than it is now. It was, we were looking more than going above $1 back.
Oh, yeah, I mean,
Right.
well,
Right.
well, I just, what I said was like, the minimal you could go to.
Just let me finish my thought, because I lose them very quickly. But the suggestion to me was a gradual move up on it. And I think we should get into a more regular review of these fees. It should be on an annual basis, just
I
like we
agree.
review parking and other stuff involved in this town.
Good point.
But,
No, that is-
but I am in the category of a gradual phase up so that we help folks with their workloads, and we also don't possibly overburden people who want to start projects.
Right.
So my question was not along, shutting down a
No,
project because of
no.
benefits. It was
No,
just
no.
that it has to be calculated into the increase. If we want this department, as it was presented, to kind of be a zero-sum process here as far as getting the fees in to cover the expenses of the department, then that has to be considered, that's all.
Right, and which is what the administrator is well aware of, that he has to look at the big picture. But we were more concerned about the service out of the chute.
Absolutely.
And as you know, we have other departments that we need to try to ramp up somehow. And how we do that and move forward. We talked about the highway guy ever since I've been here, ever since you've been here. And it becomes a burden at some point.
I just want to say one thing that is when this came up in discussion the last time we talked about this in terms of, is it a deterrent, the additional fee from someone building a house here or not? When you're looking at a $300,000 home, so someone's looking at spending $300,000, and on top of that, they're gonna spend permits
In
and everything
perspective,
else.
though.
So a $300,000 home on the current structure is, the building permit would be $1,350. If you change that, increase that by $1, it would go to $1,650. So for $300, someone's gonna be spending $300, now they're spending $300,300. They're not gonna not move the Spencer or not build that home
Right.
for the $300 additional dollars.
And currently, the fees aren't deterring them anyways.
Correct.
So it doesn't
Have a
matter.
backlog.
Even if the fees, I don't know what they are, say 200, it's no big deal, they just go on, so raising it's not gonna make a difference.
And I think what we're trying to do here is, and again, that's why we use a comparable chart, what everyone else is doing, and we can use that for as much or as little as we want, but we're definitely at the bottom, and we have been for some time.
It's a time, especially, it's useful to have this comparison, and my first response I read it was, well, it sounds like the market would certainly bear higher
yeah,
fees.
correct,
So we're
Right.
not,
If I could just
yeah.
give you an idea of where things are as far as the building department goes and just how busy we are now versus what we were last year. Okay, last year, I believe we wrote somewhere in the neighborhood of about 450 to 460 permits. That was the most the town had ever seen up until this year. This year, we wrote more permits than ever in the town's history. Okay, we wrote, right now, as of today, we wrote 525 permits.
This even going back to the.
January 1 calendar.
Going back for as many records that we have.
Interesting.
Right now, we've written more permits than ever in the town's history, okay? We're at about $42 million in construction cost today, okay? And last year, we took in roughly $75,000 of permit fees. This year, we're over $250,000, to give you an idea where we are as far as,
Solar
you know.
farms are a big part.
Solar farm,
Absolutely.
we had 2 solar farm projects, okay, that did bring in a substantial amount of money. One of them was, I think, maybe around $103,000, and then the other one was maybe $25,000. If you take that into consideration, we're still almost double this year what we were last year, just based on the limited amount of commercial business that we do, or, just the residential work. So, we're up a lot, and we're busy. And I have to tell you that the building code's changing, the energy code's changing. We have a lot of codes now that we are responsible for in our office. We have the mechanical code, and there are a lot of inspections that I don't have time to do that I should be doing on new homes, on renovations, just because of the new requirements that are out there now in the building code. I don't have time to do them. I'll be honest with you, I don't have time. And you know about the backlog of my desk. I'll see as many as 30 permits sitting on my desk at sometimes when it gets really busy. People are screaming. It adds a lot of stress in the office, and adds a lot of stress to me and my clerk. I mean, we don't have time. It's just the way it is. But the building department, as far as what we're generating now in revenue, more than supports itself. And what we generated this year would more than support what I do and my clerk does and other clerks in the office, along with maybe somebody that might be considered for a town planner's position, whatever. But we brought a lot of money in this office this year. We did a lot of work, in 19 and a half hours. And I have to tell you that I go to meetings, with my peers, and towns that are writing 450 permits a year have a full-time guy. And that's just the normal way of business. We're doing it 19 and a half, but it's taking its toll.
Thank you for, that gives some perspective to it. So what I have now is kind of a management question, but also, I guess since you're here, we could respond as well, Mr. Klansik, is what would those 5 hours mean to our backlog, or what would how would it increase our speed as a way of judging just using your calculations here and your projections and increasing it by about 5 hours a week, what will that do to us?
25% additional hours.
Yeah.
I mean, so.
But in terms of, is that gonna get a lot of people off your back? Is that gonna move things along
It's not so much
significantly?
getting people off my back, I mean.
Someone's nodding in the back of the room.
There's
Yeah, when he's out doing inspection and looking for the permit, he's there.
If someone were to take the time to spend a week and watch what we do in that office down there, whether it's my getting up, you're talking about my hours. If I get up and there's nobody in the office, I've got to go to the window. I could spend 15 minutes at the window just discussing something that might have to do with the conservation issues in the office. Or if there's not a clerk in the office because there's no time for the clerk, I have to deal with that. And then if it's a matter of a construction project, then I've got to spend time at the window to do that. Right now, I don't have that time. I don't have the luxury of spending that time with the residents to answer those questions, and whether it's maybe taking the extra time to spend a little extra time on a permit that might not allow me to have the time. I can maybe not make a mistake, or something's happening in there that I can either get it out a little bit quicker and move to another one where somebody might be waiting 20 days to get a permit for a house to get started and they're frustrated with it. It just gives me more time to do my job. And maybe do it a little bit better to give the residents what they're looking for, because quite frankly, over the past year and a half, there are a lot of frustrated, not say carpenters, construction people out there in residents, because they're waiting. If somebody calls in for an inspection on a Tuesday, and I'm only there 5 hours on Tuesday, and I'm only there 5 hours on Wednesday. So if I'm booked, and there are many days or many weeks that go by, and you see the reports, where I'm working and I'm putting out 20 inspections in 19 and a half hours, and I'm writing 25 permits. Where do I have time to do the inspection for that guy on a Wednesday? So I've got to put him off on the following Tuesday. Well, by law, I'm supposed to be at that inspection, or do that inspection within 48 hours. If he decides to go forward and he needs a rough inspection, he can get it done. But how am I going to sign off on that final inspection for that house when he never got the rough inspection? He decided to go forward with this project. I can't, so what do? Hold up his CO? It creates problems all the way across the board. The building department is a really big part of what we do in town hall. It has effects on everything. And even my going to, for instance, the assessor's office to answer their questions, to try to make sure that they've got the information to assess the people in town the correct way, maybe not charging them as much as they should have, because they needed to spend 15 minutes with me talking about a project. There's a lot more to it than just writing permits and doing inspections, and I have to tell you, there's a lot more to it than that. And I don't have time for the lot more to it. I only have time for the inspections and the permits, because we've got so many.
And that's the key, is taking care of the customer who is that builder. The other part of this is that we don't see, because we do get the complaints when they can't get a permit, but what you don't see is the ones that don't get a permit. Part of Bill's function is he's out looking to find that, and it becomes twofold. There's number one, they didn't pay for a permit. Number two, they're not getting taxed on whatever they've done, okay, until they go out and the assessors do the reevaluation, they catch it, and then, so our goal is to move the process along, help the contractor help Bill be able to look at these plans and be able to do more of the job that he really can't do in the time, and that's what's going on.
And that's not fair when that happens, when someone starts without, without a project without a permit, and they're not paying the fee, they're not giving him an opportunity to review it, it's not getting taxed because the building permits go to the assessors department, and then they have an opportunity to go out there and do a reevaluation. So it's not fair to the people that are doing things the right way.
That's
You
my
know,
point.
and you have people, unfortunately, taking advantage sometimes of a challenging situation for us, so.
What's the penalties for doing it?
Well, you could be doing a roof project, start a roof, and it's only a $65 permit. Double the permit fee if you get caught, so you've already paid, it's only gonna cost you $65.
Right.
So now we've decided we're gonna increase the fine to $250, just a flat, whatever it is, $250 first if you get caught starting without a permit.
If
We
they're
got one
violating,
today again.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not a,
Happens every day.
I'm not a guy who's into, any kind of, taxes and so forth.
Yeah, well, none of us are,
But
but when you look at-
But when someone is violating a process, I am all for, I think it should be something like $500 to, and then we
It's a
should
safety
enforce it.
issue. It
We should
really is,
enforce
it's a
it.
safety issue.
But at the same time, it's like we're forcing, I mean, if people want to keep the business moving and they want to keep the customer happy, it's like we're forcing them into that violation zone. So we
That's the
we take
scary
some
part.
responsibility.
That was gonna be my next,
Scary part.
that was gonna be my next.
The unintended consequence of the
That's
reduction
right.
there has been an increase in violations.
Right, that was my
And
next
that's,
comment.
and that's the problem.
I-
And Bill doesn't have the time to drive around all over
that's
town
not our-
and look at vans and
that's
people's
not our
driveways
fault.
and see if they have a permit or not for the
Right.
work that they're doing.
I think it'd be an interesting two-pronged approach to take as well.
Right.
But I'm all for the gradual increase and incorporating a process with this board to annually review
And
these.
I think
these
that's
things.
what we have to look at across county, so that's the perfect point, that was my goal of this.
When do you have to have a decision on that?
Oh, what we do is we'd implement it January 1st.
Right.
What we'd have to do is we could implement the fee change on January
Yeah,
1st, but
right.
in terms of appropriating funds to cover it, we can't do that until May.
Right.
So we'll have to talk about how we're gonna handle that. We'll have to look at the budget with Lee and Bill and see if there's some way we can do something beforehand and make an adjustment in May town
My
meeting.
thought is, it's a two-step process. The first process is where do we think we want to be? And at that point, then,
We have budget season coming up. So
Right.
one is, fees we typically will do January 1st if we can do them, right? They're based on the calendar year. And then from a budget standpoint, as soon as we have the money that's appropriate for it, whether it's within this year's budget, and that's something we'll have to look at, or if it's, we can't get it done until the May town meeting and the budget for July 1st. So that's something we'll talk about internally, and we'll bring back to you as part of the budget process. But the first step, as Gary mentioned, it's two-pronged. The first step is actually getting approval for the fee. You can't do the second if you can't do the first.
Okay, so we're gonna make a motion and approve fees tonight.
Sure.
Is $1 acceptable, everybody, or?
I'd like to go up more. I'd like to be more in the middle of the road between everybody. We got 3 out of 10 that are $8 and $10 right now. More than a third are almost double what we are. Middle of the road, I think, is 6 and 8.
Can I just say something, just to give you an example on, what a $1 increase would have done to just the solar permit at the Abbey? It would have brought an additional $18,000 into the town's revenue system. Just a $1 increase. And that's just one solar project. And they were glad to have a $5.50 charge per thousand. They were more than happy to pay that.
They were gonna do that project regardless of what the fee was gonna be.
Yeah, I looked at this number, and I, again, I'm a little more conservative. I was sitting here scribbling down, if we did a $1.25, that's another $5,500 in revenue on the residential side. I didn't even do the commercial side.
'Cause I think ideally we should be at 7 and 9, but 6 and 8 was like middle of the road with,
6 and 8 would be halfway, and that's kind of what we talked
Halfway,
about back in
yeah.
2010.
and that's what I asked.
So in that case, you're going up, well,
Are you going up more than $1?
well, on the residential, going from 450 to 6 is $1.50.
Yeah.
Right.
I feel like $1.50 is still in that modest, range. I look back what we had to do with the transfer station. We had neglected evaluating it for years, and we had to jump it up so disproportionately, I think I'm, and I think we were, pleased with the result. I think $1.50 is very justifiable here. It still keeps us at the low end. It's, clearly the market can bear more.
Written down,
And if
just,
we review it once a year, like Tony had stated,
That's a great-
we can
that's a great
adjust it
idea.
up and down,
Yeah.
depending on the load.
Yeah, it gives the board flexibility as to, what's going on in the economy, what's going on specifically at your desks, and I think it's the way to go. Again, I'm comfortable with that because, again, just to remind the board what the tenor of this was before.
Right.
We were pushing to go up even.
well, we were
higher.
looking to really go, but I think, I had written down the 6 and 8 here, just because I thought that, it still didn't put us at the max, but it gets us in the middle of the road, that, and I do know that people are gonna pay that anyways, do you know what I mean? Whether they built here or whether they went to another town. But I didn't want to strap it and go up $3, $2. I just thought that number made more sense from where we were before when we talked about this, to now it kind of makes sense to do something.
Well,
like the
it's a pleasure
transfer
of the board. I'd like to do 6 and 7, but that's.
And again, I'm open, I'm just telling you where I was.
It's $1.50.
I
It
just-
was presented as a dollar on each.
I just look at it this way, the only other one who's at 7 is Ware, and they're at $7 for residential, whereas we would be 6. So, I mean,
I just think personally, I think it's too big of a jump.
You could meet halfway and go to $7.50. I mean, because the 50 cents proportionally on something that's already higher, because commercial's higher rated anyway, it's probably gonna equal out. In terms of the percentage of increase to the residential rate versus the percentage of increase, so if you're going $1.50 and 2 is probably the same percentage of increase.
I think if we promise to review this, it also gives us an opportunity to revisit this if it,
I could live with the 6 and 7.
I like that, yes.
That
I like that
makes more
too.
sense.
That feels
That 6
comfortable.
to 750, I think is, when we raised that transfer station fee, we all.
Had to be done.
I mean, but it proved out, and it's more beneficial for the town and for the users. So I think, again, this is gonna be better for the town, but it's gonna be much better for the users, meaning your contractors, your homeowner, that maybe now can, I don't know, just thoughts.
so we're doing 6 and 750.
I can live with that.
yeah, I love that too.
John?
750? Yes.
Okay. I'd entertain.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to increase building inspector fees for the fiscal year 2016 to $650 per thousand for residential, 6 per 1,000 residential, and $750 per $1,000 value on commercial.
A motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Could I just, before we voted, just to review it once a year? Can we make that a stipulation?
We can incorporate it. So, I mean, we can incorporate it in the.
You can incorporate it on your yearly.
Well, when we do the when we do the community comparisons, we usually do them in December so that we can adopt it as of January
Right,
1st.
which
So
we
as
do
part
every
of that, I can ask each department in December, as part of us reviewing the community comparisons, have them submit to us fee structures, have them do the research and submit us to the fee structure.
I would like
And then you
that.
can make a decision as of January 1st, and then moving forward, if you made a decision to change the fees, you're leading up into the budget season, you can then adjust based on any changes in the fees.
Agreed, so-
Whether up or down.
Yep.
So that's the way we'll operate that. Okay.
So you want to revote that with the amended motion?
Well,
amend it, that's fine.
We can amend it to,
You can amend it, we'll just do it. I know it's, Brenda and I have a calendar that we have for each month, different things that we have to do, and we'll just
See,
add it to that.
To me, I don't think it needs to be part of the motion, we
Either way.
increase the fee. I think that what it becomes is just like your yearly renewal of all
Correct.
the licenses at that point is when it should be looked at. And we,
Standard part of the process.
yeah,
The only thing I like is, I think a vote to institutionalize it is.
make the motion.
I'd make a motion to
you're happy,
amend,
I'm happy.
to amend the motion to include institutionalizing a fee review for all departments across the town of Spencer on an annual basis.
For a second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. Now that you added all departments, I like
There you
that.
go. I have trouble stringing a sentence together,
I
Gary, so.
understand. Oh, it's with H, don't I? Got
Yeah,
it.
cool. How you feeling? You feeling better?
All right.
A little less stress would be great.
Now, what you went through, you went less stress, a lot less stress.
Well, I think it's gonna be interesting, as we get into the budget
watch.
season, and
watch.
Adam, it'd be useful to be more specific about this. It's, for anyone watching, it's not like we're trying to make it self-supporting. You made the point that it's not an enterprise account, but if we're bringing in more money and fees to the town, and that's also a source to increase our hours for inspection and getting us back to having
Well, that's
a
what
plan
that's
in
paid for.
capacity.
We've talked about, once you go through a process of reduction, how do you get creative in terms of bringing things back to where they need to be in terms of providing services? So whether it's regionalizing a service, whether it's privatizing a service, or whether it's adjusting the fee structure so you can provide additional revenue into the general fund to support a service. We have to constantly look at ways to work within our means, but also be creative to expand those means.
Again, I get, my analogy since the day I stepped into this place is like, let's run it a little more like a business. If you were in a business and you provided a service and you couldn't, your price of your service didn't cover what it took to
cost,
provide it,
right.
then you'd be out of business. So I think we should, wherever possible, adopt that model and do it. I thank you for thinking that way.
No,
And I think that was the whole goal this year as we set forth is what did we look at, and it's virtually everything, so.
And if the public sees that we're doing this, then they'll be a little more receptive to.
I think that at the end of the day, just like we were talking about the public safety issue and the issue before, the benefit outweighs the impact.
Right. And
So the increased hours that affects them, many people coming in to use the service versus again, the $300 on a $300,000 home, it's not gonna matter.
I agree.
Or on a $1 million solar farm, then it's not gonna deter them,
So listen,
but it'll
they're
help
going
us
with that no
provide
matter
the
what,
services that we
so.
need to provide.
Perfect.
And if people find where
Next.
if people find where a town is easier to deal with and we're more efficient and you can respond more quickly, that's certainly gonna
Well,
add to our.
we live in that type of
attractiveness for
society where
development.
nobody wants to wait. Let's
Truth of the
face it.
matter is
Nobody wants to
you
wait.
yourself,
Nobody.
if you're getting good service someplace, you don't mind paying for it.
All right, thanks for
Until you
coming out,
get bad
guys.
service.
Yeah, it does.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bill.
Hey, thanks.
Thanks, Lee. All right, next item, discussion, Lake Street School.
Well, a couple things. One is, obviously, it's been a hot topic at, what sounds like those who have been attending the school committee meetings, it's been discussing about when they're turning this back. Obviously, there was a vote way back in budget season, April, March of last year, that eventually there'd be a transition of turning this building back to the town. One of the things I wanted to do from an administrative standpoint was just bring up to the board, and I will as well to the school district, is we have a lease agreement as part of our district agreement. As part of our district agreement, we lease town-owned buildings that are not district buildings to the district, and obviously no cost, and then they have responsibilities that are in the lease in terms of maintaining them, and we have obligations in terms of large capital items, et cetera. But the lease agreement as it stands now still refers to Maple Street School, and in addition, still refers to Lake Street School, which I guess is coming back sooner than later. So one of the things I'd like to do is get permission from the board as an assignment, not that I need more things to do, but to go back to the lease agreement and work with the superintendent and business manager to revise the lease to obviously eliminate the buildings that aren't even relevant anymore.
Right.
But as part of that discussion, I figured I'd bring it up to you folks, and I think there was one key clause in here that people wanted to talk about, and that was in the event there's any buildings that get turned back, what it says in regards to how it comes back, and therefore, just looking for the appropriate section. I think it's 7.
Page 5?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It talks about removing leased the premises, all materials, equipment, and property. And then it talks about obviously restoring to, other than ordinary wear and tear, returning in an acceptable manner. So at the top of the paragraph in 7. The leasee shall surrender the leased premises in as good a condition as it were at the beginning of the term. So I think that's one of the concerns at those of us that have walked through the building or are aware of the building, not only the Maple Street structure and the work that it took to clean that building, to get it to be usable or for reuse. We're now looking at potentially the same thing for Lake Street, that the less condition it comes back to us means the more of a cost to us when we go back to reuse it. So I figured I'd at least get the ball rolling with the discussion with you guys. One is, I think we need to amend the lease when the building comes back, eliminate those two buildings from the agreement, and then in addition to that, does the board have any concerns? I guess maybe we wait until we actually get a key back and say it's now ours. Do we then have to go and look at how it's handled in terms of what condition it comes back? I have met with the superintendent, and I have met with the business agent and asked them to be cognizant of the condition of the building when they turn it back. Obviously, the less that they do, the more we have to do, and hopefully they're cognizant of that moving forward. But I have not been involved in the school committee meetings or discussions, so I don't know if as a liaison, I think John, you're the liaison to the school committee, so I don't know if there's been any discussion in terms of, at that level, in terms of the building.
Gary and I were both there at the last one, and it was pretty clear that they're not ready at this point. My concern I expressed to Gary afterwards is it's going to come back to us, and so how do we keep oil in the tank and keep the heat on if we don't have we're not carrying a budget line at this point? Where does
I did talk to
Okay.
him on that, and short-term we're covered.
Short-term recovered is next
Yeah.
year, if you recall, as part of the last adjustment that we did the fall town meeting, we did reserve some funds. I think it was $4,000 and put it in the selectmen's budget for oil and electricity.
I'd forgotten that.
I can tell you, we may have to make another adjustment in May. I don't know, because I didn't know how much to reserve, because I didn't know when the building was coming back. I mean, they took the vote in March and April last year, and here we are, it's almost Christmas and we haven't had the building back yet, so we're almost halfway through the year. So if what sounds like it comes back sooner than later, and within the next couple of weeks or month, and we do have to heat over the winter and electricity January, February, March into April, we may have to make an adjustment at the annual town meeting in May. And obviously the $4,000 that we put towards it is $4,000 less than we have to transfer come May. And then, moving forward, we have created the committee, we have put aside some funds for the architect to go through the building in addition to other buildings. So hopefully that process picks up this year. And then we're figuring out what to do with that building sooner than later, whether it's keep it, sell it, reuse it, whatever. So there's a lot to plan and discuss as this year develops. It's going to be a big undertaking in terms of what our next steps are, but we don't even know what those are until once we get the building in whatever condition it is back to us. So.
Is it possible for us to do a site visit before it's turned over? Would they be?
Well, anyways.
I can reach out to, before we accept the return of the keys, do a site visit. I can reach out to the superintendent for that.
Who would we have on our side to cover our?
Well, we have a utility facilities department, right? So we have
Guys.
two gentlemen sitting in the back, and obviously they have
Thank you for hanging around.
I think that Evans definitely, as has been the case for many years, is that the highway staff not only cleans catch basins, plows streets, but they're asked to come in and move desks and set up for a town meeting and do other interior building type activities, whether it's reset the boiler or go into Sugden Block when we have stuff in the bottom of the building. So the highway department does a lot more than just highway work. It is a utilities and facilities department, and the gentlemen that work there are aware of that, and they do a great job understanding that they're asked to do a lot more than maybe most highway departments in other towns. But that being said, we had some issues when Maple Street came back. Mr. Butler was part of that. So definitely those two gentlemen, a couple of selectmen, and go from there.
Yeah, I mean, that's not my wheelhouse, and I just want to make sure, it's our walkthrough for the selectmen, because I don't know how much we're going to accomplish.
Not to beat a
From the-
dead horse, just a few things going on today. 8:30, I met MPC, who is our plumbing and heating contractor. I met them at the school. Mr. Suda was there with 2 janitors still cleaning. I had them look at the boiler, so they had a good idea of where the controls were, exactly what was going on with it, and how that actually functions. So I did that because obviously at midnight, normally it's Mr. Butler who will get the call. So I did that just to be preventative. I've been at the school the last few days. They've been there just to, my concern was over half 5-gallon buckets of paint, all that stuff that is tough to get rid of. They have assured me that there's somebody coming in to pick up all the audio visual equipment, the old TVs, the old anything like that, because it's considered hazardous, is getting disposed of. They've hired a company for that. And it's twofold, because they have a dump truck they can't get that I'm working on for them,
Yeah, I mean, on top of that, we've got ceiling tiles that are all asbestos. If there's a leak somewhere in that
Exactly.
ceiling and that comes down, we're talking about a $500,000 hazmat
So
cleanup.
they did tell me today that, and there's a janitor that works second shift, I don't know which school. He is actually in there to clean out the maintenance room where the, most of this stuff is, so. And I'll double check. I asked Gary to keep me in the loop, let me know the progress, because it was gonna be June, we'd get it back. Then it was December 15th.
It was October at one point.
And so I just don't want to get blindsided, so.
Along those same lines, Mr. Chairman, is there a way we can get the process with the building reuse committee going? And again, it seems that I'd rather do some footwork ahead before we get into the bureaucratic footwork that needs to be
Before
done.
we
You got
own
an RFP has to be done, and it
Right.
takes another year to get, to
And I
move
had
that
that
building.
conversation with the administrator to see how fast we could get moving, so that we could, some of these things we gotta look at and make a decision on, I think are pretty easy.
Yep.
When it comes to some of the other stuff, we got a little bit of homework and legwork, and the sooner we get going, the sooner we'll be able to move forward.
The one thing I noticed with the Sugden block, again, I think we've talked about this before, is sitting back and letting the crowd come to us does not work. I think we got
I think we
building,
proved
the
that.
building reuse group has got to be proactive and look for creative solutions and reach out and see if we could pull them in instead of waiting them to come to
Yep.
us.
So I've reached out to the planning board because they have I know the Economic Development Committee is waiting on people as well, so I'm waiting for the planning board to meet. They had scheduling issues with the holidays and everything else. They're not meeting until January, so they need to make an appointment to both, or the Economic Development Committee, the Building Committee, and the Solar Committee. Waiting on that. We've had a couple people with Economic Development, a couple people with Solar, but now that the money's been approved for setting aside for architects, we typically don't advertise positions in Christmas time. It's not a great time for people. So we'll put an advertisement the first week in January and the new leader on cable, on our website, and hopefully get some interested candidates.
I did, just so everybody's aware, I did ask Gary when he thought, because there was a lot of stuff on social media that they would open it up to the public. I think that was part of the conversation, John, with that night.
That night, yes, that wasn't.
Their goal is to pick, and I'm hoping, with Christmas coming up, I thought he said this Saturday, but my gut tells me it won't be till the following. Sir?
If I may, I have some questions about Lake Street School before you close the discussion.
Now you want to get involved. No, I'm just kidding.
Public hearing.
As long as people can hear what we're going to have before.
Any way you want, Steve.
So, my questions come from multiple perspectives. As a citizen of the town of Spencer, as my position as a public official, as a member of the Building Reuse Committee, and it's based on probably a combination of hearsay, which made up in truth to what part I don't know. I've never seen the lease, so I don't know what the contents of the lease are. But obviously, from the town perspective, we should be concerned about the condition of the building, like that you've spoken about, and want to get it back in, but also the assets that are associated with it. And what are those assets that belong to the town? From my building department's perspective, if I wanted to purchase some security cameras, that would be a capital investment. I'd have to go to the capital committee and I'd have to buy them.
and then that would be a capital purchase, and that would be part of the structure. When the school attaches things to the building, are those part of the school, or are they capital in the town and now part of the lease, or are they part of the school? Can the school strip the building and sell its contents? What can they sell and not sell? My understanding is that they sold their security system or donated to somebody else. And then my concern with that is, were procurement laws followed? Were ethics violations? Did they occur or not occur? Were other laws broken? I've heard that they talk about taking all of the kitchen equipment and selling that. Is that something that they can do? Isn't that something that came with the building when they first got it? Is that a capital investment? Is that equipment? What is it? So can they strip the building of things, and then all of a sudden there's these assets and these funds that we could otherwise, use ourselves, and they're stripping, and how are they getting rid of them? Not only are they entitled to strip them and sell them, but are they also allowed to do that through the methods that they're doing it? Can they just call and say, well, we want to give this to St. Mary's because that's our friend? I made that up, I don't know where it went, I don't know what school it went to. But I'm just using that as an example, because hearsay goes a long way, it just builds up and it catches on momentum, but there is some truth in there somewhere, and I just don't want to see the town be mistreated, and because the school either was naive, or they were trying to get as much as they could before they walked away from the building.
All good points.
Yeah, fair enough. I think the intent was to give like desks and chairs and things like that to a school that needed them.
Which they did do.
And I think as part of that, there may have been things that the school took that they maybe shouldn't have, and my understanding is those things are coming back.
They,
I don't know, again, I don't know, this, a lot of this is hearsay for me too, but.
I've asked a couple of questions because I've been there a lot, trying to see, maybe being nosy, but, yeah, the camera was gone. I brought that up today because normally it's watches both ends. Haven't got an answer where that went. The desk, anything like that was offered. If the town needed anything, more than welcome to it. They also reached out to neighboring towns if there was anything, because in all reality, when we closed Maple Street, a lot of that stuff ended up at that school. From that school, now it's down in Wyatt Village, and it gets scattered, and this is the overflow. I will tell you, they've gone through more books today and moved more to Wyatt Village because they missed them, so that's a good thing. But, I know that, you're right, a couple, mixer and a table was moved out of the kitchen. My understanding is they thought they might be able to use it at another school, or maybe trade it in to get something they need for the other school. I haven't got clarification, but it did ask those questions.
I have no idea whether or not a piece of equipment in the kitchen came to the school when it was, or it was purchased by the school or purchased by the town. No idea.
If it's bolted down, wouldn't that be part of the structure?
Well, see, I mean,
it's a twofold. I mean, it's.
I think this, I don't know, in terms of specific, I think the security system is one of those things, is it part of the structure or not? If they attach the security system to the inside, and then cameras in, and they bought it, and they assembled it, and then took it out of there, is that something that should have stayed as part of the building? I don't know.
But-
I mean, these are technical questions that.
Technically, the taxpayers of the town bought that equipment, not the school district, correct?
It depends, I think, indirectly or directly. If it came as part of a assessment, and they had E&D, and they
Right.
made a purchase, and it was all part of
It's
the
there.
district's money
Right.
to buy, whether it was a desk or whether it was, it indirectly obviously came from the town taxpayers, but also there's a whole bunch of other funds that come in there, state aid and everything else. So, I don't know, because I wasn't here when the school was built and was given to them, what was in it, and
We're
those
in
contents.
1956,
I'm
I'm just checking.
Just trying to get here as fast as I could.
I
Well,
understand.
I mean, I would think that there's some sort of kitchen equipment that was there previously that's been replaced since. But they're.
No idea.
We can open a
used
can
it,
of worms here, because,
Right.
theoretically, it was purchased, now we're looking at 86-14, possible split.
Yeah,
For the stuff and
80/20,
depreciation.
but you know what, and I seriously mean this, because John will tell you, I kind of got a little heated that night, I think, on some of the stuff. Some of it out of frustration is that if we were gonna market a building, would you market it as a school, would you market it as, and how valuable would that be? And to me, it was, maybe it's a selling point, I don't know that. That was my argument, and then, as I looked at it, and they said, well, geez, some of this stuff was bought back when Ralph was here. I remember something blew up, they didn't figure it for capital, I don't remember what it was.
It was the part of the kitchen.
But it was something to do with that, so, what was it?
Screen tables or something?
Maybe that's what, I don't remember, but I know that if that's a fact, that isn't all that old, and the longevity of that could be more useful maybe at the high school that's got an older version. So whether that's that or whether they traded in something, I think that value is more, now devil's advocate, because I'm looking and saying, okay, would they come to the town and say, listen, this thing blew up, we need the money? Or, you know, is it better to let it go that way? So I ended my fight at that point. I didn't think it
I don't know,
had
I mean,
enough
typically
merit to
when
be
a
able
building
to
or structure-
clarify who had it.
So we own the building and structure, so
Right.
typically you're talking about the roof, the windows, the
Right.
doors, the brick, the mortar, the sidewalk, you know, the parking lot, the grounds, those are all ours. So if the district went and bought something and outfitted the building, a smart board, a computer.
Exactly. And that's the way I looked at it.
Poster on the wall, whatever, I mean, is that part of the structure, is the security system part of it? To me, it's, I don't know, I think you're splitting hairs at that point.
Yeah, you're right. Some of it's just bad.
I think the most important thing that Steve was talking about, if they were doing something in terms of disposing of equipment,
Well, what
it
I
had to
said
have been
is-
done in a legal and
Right,
manner.
under the
way.
procurement
And-
laws, I didn't want them to take a mixer and go, and I can't remember the lady's name, Angela Napton, maybe?
It was Angela.
I don't remember, but
Yes.
which kind of set me off, was, her argument was, a mixer is worth 6,000 to 7,000, we're just gonna take it and go sell it. Well, there's laws against that.
Sure.
I mean, that's just the wrong way to put it, and I just think she was speaking emotionally, so.
Yeah, some of it's just bad form as well. I mean,
so-
ripping off a security system on a building and leaving us to hold the bag on possible
Well, and we
damages
know
under
what's
that
happened
building.
already,
Yeah,
so.
yeah, it's just, we just gotta foster some communication.
So the cameras are still up. What they did is that whatever the monitor is, those cameras plug into along with the head unit plus the monitor is what I saw gone. And I don't know who else would use it. So that was my question, and I haven't got an answer yet.
But Steve makes a great point. So in our conversations, we've gotta include this as a gentle conversation point.
Well, I've invited them to, the superintendent and the biz manager and anyone from the school committee to come to our January 11th meeting as far as a budget kickoff. So those questions can come up then. I can send an email before then asking them to just provide some detail in terms of, again, I don't even know when the building's coming back.
Yeah, right,
We still
So,
don't, because it's a
I mean, there's so
matter
many
of-
questions going on here, and in terms of what the process is. I'm not the procurement police. It's not my job to make sure the business manager is created a policy, dispose of items less than
Well,
5,000 is
it
following.
becomes his responsibility.
It's his
really, not
responsibility.
ours.
I know he's
I mean-
taken the courses, and I'm not sure if he's certified or not, but the school committee, the superintendent, the business manager, it's their responsibility to make sure they're following the laws. I'm not the procurement police. So I have to make an assumption that and I give people the benefit of the doubt that they're gonna follow those rules and procedures. If they want my help and want my advice, I'm here to give it. I'm not an expert. They have the Secretary of State, Inspector General's office that they can help them with. Again, a lot of stuff comes in through hearsay. This person took that, this person gave that. You know, I hear it, but it's, you know, in terms of dedicating my time to going in there and walking through the building and making sure which items were there before and which were gone after, who got it and how the process was, you know, it's quite a task.
I'm more concerned is, listen, they have a lot of stuff there that is either gonna end up being used by some of the schools, and hopefully they can use it, or it's gonna end up in a dumpster. So my mindset is, if somebody can use it, it's fine. If it's no use to them, and I don't know what the cost of a desk is, but I can tell you they're a little beat up today.
Yeah, correct, Mr. Chairman. And my concern is even simpler than that, is in 3 months, that building could become a real pit very quickly as far as a security issue. So when you mentioned that was a big red flag for me.
And who's responsible for the damages that are already done to the building? The vandalism, the broken windows, are those gonna be fixed before they're turned over?
And there
Because
is no-
that was never there
There is no
previously.
broken windows, but I can tell you that the graffiti
Yeah,
that is
graffiti's, I'm
there
sure,
is,
started.
Are they taking the air conditioners out of the windows because those don't have window panes anymore?
I don't know.
Cracked windows. These are questions I would like answered.
Well, you can ask them on January 11th.
We just gotta make sure we maintain decorum, we're trying to build relationships, maintain relationships, and find a way to address those in a
But in the
civil.
meantime, not to beat a dead horse, but as long as it's, remains in their hands, they're monitoring the oil tank and making
They
sure
did
that
that
the
today.
basic utilities
Did
are
that today,
working.
there's, I can tell you, 1,400 gallons probably in there. I think back when we first started, I think when we stuck it, roughly 3,000.
Okay. Well, winter's been
Which
kind.
holds true, it burns somewhere around 11.2 gallons an hour. So if you did the math back when we did it, it's holding true, so.
Steve had one more question or comment.
Just to kind of clarify, and I didn't intend in nickel and dime, I just use the cameras as an example. You know, they might be 10 years old and nothing we would want to use anyway. But having been involved in retro reuse studies like this, the thing that would concern me is kitchen equipment, cafeteria equipment. Those are salvageable. Those you can actually, you know,
Have a
get a
market value.
return on.
Right.
And a lot of times when a building like that is retrofitted, that's something that you go out and you use those funds to pay for other things that go with that retrofit. You know, if you might have $100,000 worth of it, these are expensive things. And I would imagine that when that school was built, it had a kitchen, and it had all the kitchen equipment. And when before they walked into the door, it had a kitchen, and it had a cafeteria, and it had kitchen equipment. And if they had to fix stuff during it, it's typically part of the lease. You know, we've turned it over to you, and if you have to replace equipment, even though they bought a mixer, there was a mixer when they got there.
Right.
And those are the type of things that I'm talking about. And then the other point is like, no, Adam should not be the procurement police, but if we ask a question, they should be able to justify it and show to us that they did it in an above board way.
We'll definitely
It should be
ask
up to
them
them to be open to us. We shouldn't have to investigate to prove that they should be able to show to us
Right.
that what they did was proper.
Thus why the conversation tonight.
And lastly, I'd rather see the building before it's turned over to us.
Yeah. Right.
Sooner than later, you know, tomorrow. You know, if possible.
You wanna meet me there tomorrow?
I don't want to see it.
Christmas Day.
Checking.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We do that walkthrough soon.
And that's the truth,
Mention.
it's why we're trying to, keep a handle on it. Thanks, Steve. Okay. So that's the progress, that's where we're at, still don't have a firm date.
We still need a vote for, to redo the lease, correct? Taking
Well,
out
I don't
Maple
need a
Street
vote
Lane.
as far as, typically what you do is you vote before you sign it. So
Okay.
if you would
I
like, as
think you
part
need
of,
to look at the language and take out,
Right.
I think we gotta clean this up, because, again, Maple
I want to
Street-
remove the buildings that are no longer
That are
relevant.
out
So it's
there.
basically going to be a lease agreement strictly for Wire Village School, and that's
Right,
it.
that's it.
All right, and then if the board has concerns about the way the building's coming back, and the way the last two buildings came back, then we need to talk about that section.
And I think we have some concerns about what's being taken care of at Wire Village now with the, after the snow of last year and all the gutters that were torn down that are still there. So maybe, I think it's twofold, but I think first we gotta get rid of the two that are in here that don't belong in there anymore.
That's-
Well, one
It was my
does up
precursor to
until
the
a point.
discussion tonight with the building coming back, that
Right.
doesn't make sense to have a lease agreement that has two buildings in there.
I agree.
And I would probably like to do a walkthrough on Wire Village too.
Well, you can go over there early anytime.
Not a lot of this.
Working with the superintendent.
You know, just call. Right now.
Well, we should,
I think we got a lot of things happening. That, number one.
I'll reach out in terms of, one is that I'm gonna be working on this, and the other is we'd like to schedule a walkthrough prior to getting back, and we'll start with those two
Prior to
things.
them giving us the keys and.
We'll start with that.
Yeah.
And
I
then
just
we'll-
look at it and.
Then over the next couple months, we'll work on revising the lease as part of the budget discussion, and then we can have an opportunity to go to a visit to Wire Village. Maybe we can have an organized visit as part of that. And maybe just tie it into the whole budget discussion. What are you doing here? How many
Right.
classes you filled? Blah, 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 you know, how it's,
That'd be good.
That's fair. Anything else? Yeah. Oh, clean.
I'm good. Mr. Chair, motion to adjourn.
Oh,
Well,
No.
what?
This is our last meeting of
Right,
2015,
so
so just
everybody,
want to say
Merry
it's been a
Christmas,
great
Happy
year.
New Year.
Merry Christmas to all, Happy New Year, and we'll look forward to doing a lot more work in next year.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Merry Christmas, everybody,
Merry Christmas. and Happy New Year.
and Happy
Forward
New
to a
Year.
great 2016.
Perfect.
January 11th, we'll be back.
I have a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second?
Do you want to put out this still, boards to be filled?
There are several
For next
boards.
year,
Yep,
possibly?
We have Economic Development Committee and Building Reuse and Solar Landfill Committee. We'll be advertising formally in the newspaper, but if anyone has any interest, we've, watching these meetings, we've had a lot of discussion on those, so any interest, there's a volunteer form on our website, www.spencerma.gov. Go to volunteer positions, you can fill out a form, get it to me, and we'll talk about getting you on the committee.
Perfect.
This town is built on those types of
Yeah, it is.
committees.
Yeah, it is. I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor to adjourn?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, everybody. Good night. Thank you, Aaron Keys, for doing the show.
See you next year.